If a person could develop peace within themselves, then the whole world could be at war, and they could still think well, work well, and be well. No matter who you are or what you're going through, the same thing is available to you. Inside your soul, Marcus Aurelius would remind you, there is peace that you can retreat to anytime you like. If we are to aspire to power, this is the type to aspire to. If we want to lead, let us start by leading ourselves.
At dawn, when you have trouble getting out of bed, tell yourself, I have to go to work. As a human being, what do I have to complain of if I'm going to do what I was born for? The things I was brought into this world to do? Or is this what I was created for, to huddle under the blankets and stay warm? But it's nicer here. So you were born to feel nice instead of doing things and experiencing them? Do you see the plants, the birds, the ants and spiders and bees going about their individual tasks, putting the world in order as best they can? And you're not willing to do your job as a human being? Why aren't you running to do what your nature demands? But we have to sleep sometime. Agreed, but nature set a limit on that, as it did on eating and drinking. And you're over the limit. You've had more than enough of that, but not of working. There, you're still below your quota. You don't love yourself enough, or you'd love your nature too, and what it demands of you. People who love what they do wear themselves down doing it. They even forget to wash or eat. Do you have less respect for your own nature than the engraver does for engraving? The dancer for the dance. When they're really possessed by what they do, they'd rather stop eating and sleeping than give up practicing their arts. Is helping others less valuable to you, not worth your effort? In every way, the deck was stacked against Epictetus. 2,000 years ago in Hierapolis, he was born into slavery. He wasn't even given a name. Epictetus just means acquired one. He was tortured. The fruits of his labor were stolen. His body was abused, like a horse that was ridden into the ground and then put down. Later, he was unfairly exiled. He went through unimaginable adversity and difficulty, and yet he triumphed. Because Epictetus didn't look at his life as a series of horrors and tragedies, but as a set of endless opportunities. A podium and a prison is each a place, he said. One high and the other low, but in either place, your freedom of choice can be maintained if you wish. Every event has two handles, he said, one by which it can be carried and one by which it can't. Epictetus chose to focus on what was in his control, his opinions, his values, his wants, his sense of self, and ignore the rest. Looking around at the powerful men and women in Nero's court where he worked, Epictetus began to notice that although he was a slave, he was freer than many of them. They were enslaved to power and ambition, pleasure and attention. Their minds wandered. They were easily distracted. They were wounded by minor offenses and consumed by petty grudges. They lived bad lives. So he educated himself under the great Stoic teacher Musonius Rufus and eventually won his freedom. He himself became a teacher of Rome's brightest students, including the future emperor Hadrian. His ideas made their way to Marcus Aurelius, and suddenly, a man who had so little power was influencing the most powerful people in the world for the better. What we learn from Epictetus is not just sheer endurance and resilience, but the ability to find and make a good life anywhere, in all times. Circumstances don't make the man, Epictetus said. They only reveal him to himself. The Stoics said we are actors in a play. All an actor can do is play their role well and learn to let go of the rest. That's how we must see life. We don't control where we were born or who our parents are or how other people treat us. We only control what we do with the material we are given. Yes, so much of it is out of our control, but we have a lot more agency than some people think. We can, through determination and skill, learn how to shape our own destiny. Control it? No. Shape it? Yes. By turning in a splendid performance in our current role, whatever it happens to be.
It was the 1st century AD, and Lucius Annaeus Seneca was struggling to work. The problem was the ear-shattering, soul-rattling noise that poured in from the street below. Athletes worked out in the gymnasium underneath his suite of rooms, dropping heavy weights. A masseuse pummeled the backs of old, fat men. At the entrance of the building, a pickpocket was being arrested and making a scene. Passing carriages rumbled over the stone streets, while carpenters hammered away in their shops and vendors shouted their wares. Children laughed and played. Dogs barked. And more than the noise outside his window, there was the simple fact that Seneca's life was falling apart. Overseas unrest threatened his finances. He was getting older and could feel it. He had been pushed out of politics by his enemies, and now on the outs with Nero, he could easily, at the emperor's whim, lose his head. It was not a great environment for a human to get anything done. The noise and distractions of the empire were enough to make me hate my very powers of hearing, Seneca told a friend. Yet for good reason, this scene has tantalized admirers for centuries. How does a man besieged by adversity and difficulty not only not go out of his mind, but actually find the serenity to think clearly and to write perfectly crafted essays which would reach millions upon millions and touch on truths that few have ever accessed? I have toughened my nerves against all that sort of thing, Seneca explained to that same friend about the noise. I force my mind to concentrate and keep it from straying to things outside itself. All outdoors may be bedlam, provided that there is no disturbance within. Isn't that what we all crave? To be able to tune out your surroundings, to access one's full capacities at any time and any place, despite every difficulty. How wonderful that would be. If a person could develop peace within themselves, then the whole world could be at war, and they could still think well, work well, and be well. You may be sure that you are at peace with yourself, Seneca wrote, when no noise reaches you, when no word shakes you out of yourself, whether it be flattery or a threat, or merely an empty sound buzzing about you with unmeaning sin. In this state, nothing could touch them, not even a deranged emperor. No emotion could disturb them, no threat could interrupt them. Every beat of the present moment would be theirs for living. They would have achieved that magical place, that magical word of stillness. He buried too many children. He saw plagues and flood and war. He was betrayed by those closest to him. He was surrounded by the corrupt and the inept and the endlessly ambitious. While critics are wrong to call Marcus Aurelius depressing or negative, he was unquestionably in pain, tired, and frustrated. This was a man who quite understandably found himself, as we all do, tired of life. Yet despite the role that suicide had played in the history of Stoicism and the more accepted place it had in Roman history, Marcus did not choose that route. He did not blame anyone. He did not resent the hand he was dealt or the painful cards he had to play. He soldiered on. He found respite in physical activity and his work. He tried, as we talked about recently, to focus on the beauty amid the ugliness of life. He was brave enough to ask for help, as we have also talked about. Marcus Aurelius not only kept getting out of bed each morning, but he pushed himself to do it early. He reminded himself in those very same pages of meditations the reasons why he was here on this planet, what his nature demanded of him, what his duty was. He carried on and found relief and purpose, and even joy in this. No matter who you are or what you're going through, the same thing is available to you. Inside your soul, Marcus Aurelius would remind you, there is peace that you can retreat to anytime you like. It's okay that you're tired. It's understandable and perfectly acceptable. Just use the resources available to you. Most of all, stick around. Marcus Aurelius must have wondered what he did to deserve all this. First, he lost his father at age 3. Then he was pulled from his first love, philosophy, and pushed into politics. When he finally became emperor, decades of peace exploded into 19 years of border wars and civil strife. There was a plague. There were floods. He had crippling health problems. At some point, as he buried another one of his children, as he wept over the ceaseless toll from the disease and pestilence, he must have thought, haven't I given enough? When will this end? What fresh horrors await? And yet somehow, some way, he never managed to give himself over to this despair. He kept going. He pushed away resentment and bitterness, fear, or helplessness. There are dark moments in his meditations, to be sure, but mostly what you see in those pages are little sentences about how life still has meaning, about how he can find goodness in the world, how he has to keep doing his duty. A full 10% of the book is given over to things he's grateful for. So don't let anyone tell you that Stoicism is a dour and pessimistic philosophy. Don't let anyone tell you that this is a philosophy of resignation. On the contrary, it is a deeply optimistic and resilient belief system. It's not about giving up. It's about not giving up, not giving in, not letting fate or misfortune break you, of loving life despite it all. Marcus never quit. He never took any of it personally. He never stopped being good, and neither can you. Marcus Aurelius was a true philosopher king, but he wasn't the first or the last among the Stoics. The first emperor, Octavian, studied under Athenodorus. Hadrian took classes from Epictetus, and Antoninus was a kind of natural Stoic. But actually, all the Stoics were of the same mold. Cleanthes was a manual laborer, but he carried himself like his work mattered, like he mattered. Cato, a man in command of himself, had no desire for the power that Caesar so destructively sought. Epictetus was a slave, but he knew he was freer than most of the men in Nero's court. As Epictetus' teacher Musonius Rufus would say, I believe a good king is from the outset and by necessity a philosopher, and the philosopher is from the outset a kingly person. For the Stoics, it didn't matter what one did for a living, it mattered how they did it. Yes, sure, there was the job king, but far more important was being a kingly person, was conquering the greatest empire, the one that Seneca laid out, command of oneself. If we are to aspire to power, this is the type to aspire to. If we want to lead, let us start by leading ourselves. If we want accolades and privileges, let us seek to deserve them rather than to lust after and acquire them. And by the way, some of the names in today's message, Athenodorus and Cleanthes and Musonius Rufus, maybe that's not as familiar to you as Marcus and Seneca and Epictetus, the so-called Big Three, but they're actually just as fascinating and, in some cases, better examples of what Stoicism is supposed to be. And they're actually who I profile in Lives of the Stoics, The Art of Living from Marcus Aurelius to Zeno, Zeno being the founder of Stoicism, which also might not have totally landed with you. But I really wanted to look at who the Stoics were, what they did, how they lived, where they lived up to the philosophy, where they fell short. When I sign it, we have signed copies in the Daily Stoic store, I usually write acta non verba, which means deeds, not words. How do you practice the stuff? How do you live up to it? That's what the book's about, and I'd love for you to check it out if you haven't already. If you want to keep your Stoicism-inspired journey going, sign up for the Daily Stoic email at dailystoic.com/email. It's one Stoic-inspired email every single day. Wisdom to help you with the problems of life. Stoicism is intended, and you can sign up at dailystoic.com/email. You can unsubscribe whenever you want. I'd love for you to join us.